Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I hope that you have a really nice week. Um, we're very happy to have you here in our second module session for the disaster and climate change risk assessment course. And in this session, we're going to work on an example of the qualitative assessment. As I mentioned, is going to be really similar of what you have to do in the exercise from the module. So we hope that this will be really useful for you. Oops. So the objectives of the model are like to learn how we can perform a qualitative risk assessment in the projects, when it is important to perform it, and in which part of the project cycle. So we have seen from the previous weeks, the idea is to assess risk in a progressive way. As we know that each project and each case is different. And if we identify in the previous analysis, the screening, that we need more information to take decisions, then we might complete a disaster risk assessment. So the idea is here to understand when do we have to make a qualitative and when do we have to make a quantitative risk assessment. The specific objectives are to identify the types of qualitative assessments we can perform. When should we conduct this assessment during the project life cycle, and who should be part of those assessments? And to gather all the main conclusions that we can have to the process, and to define the strategy to mitigate and manage risk in the project. This is taking some time. Okay. So here is the reminder of the dates of the course. So we are now in week 3. This is session for module 2. Remember that on next Monday, April 4th, that's the deadline to complete both the questionnaire and the exercise for module 2. Please remember that you must complete this before before midnight in Washington DC time. As the platform does not allow any changes or special considerations, please remember to upload the exercise with time. And if you have any questions after today's sessions and during the weekend, please remember that we have a limited access to the email during the weekend, but we will answer all your questions on Monday morning really early. So please plan the deliver and the completion of the module accordingly. And before going to the specific questions that you may have in the of this week's module, we wanted to have like a live possibility to work with you on an example of the exercise that you have to complete during the module. And for this, we're not going to use the example that you have in the model. That's the coastal flood event in this island in the Caribbean, but we're going to use the case study of the tourism thematic park. That's a case that we worked in the bank, and we found it very useful for you to have like additional content in these live sessions. So if you want to have more details on this case study, please contact us. The information is in Spanish, but we can also discuss this case further with you. So this example, we have explained it in the previous live sessions. This is Automotive Park that's located, oops, that's located, as you can see in the image, in a flood-prone area. So it is in the left side of two rivers. I don't know. Can you see my pointer? The, or should
Yes,
I?
yes, we see your pointer. Yeah, Alejandra, yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. So this is the park. These are the like infrastructure, the main infrastructure of the park. And the red lines that you see here are trails where tourists can also go hiking in this like more forest area. So uh, the project, as you can see, is located within two main rivers. So a part of the design was to perform an hydrology and hydraulic analysis to see to what extent a flood may impact the project. And these are the results that I'm going to show you of this study. So what was performed was a flood extension for a 4-hour rainfall event. And we're going to see images of the different return periods. So here is for a 5-year return period. This means that this is an event that is very frequently, it happens very frequently, but its magnitude is very low. You can see that the water is contained in the river section. As we increase the return period, here's the 10-year return period, we can start seeing how at these events of extreme rainfall, the river doesn't have enough capacity to contain all the flow, and water can start impacting both the project. As you can see here, you can see that there are areas that may be flooded after one of these events happens, but also the communities that are located nearby. And this is important to consider in our analysis. It's not that it's not just how the project may be impacted, but also the nearby communities, because all the actions and decisions that we take may consider all the context. These are the results for the 50-year return period. As you can see, the blue area that is showing us more impacts both to the park and to the communities. And for the 100-year return period, the conditions are worst, and the water also affects the trails that tourists use here in the upper area of the park. And this information is very useful because we can then conclude that we need some kind of measures that may reduce the exposure of the park to that kind of floods, but also we may have additional measures to reduce the vulnerability of both the park and the nearby communities, so we can all have like a lower risk. And here we just want to have like a conversation with you to see what do you think. So the first questions, and please open your mics and answer in the chat. is what can we conclude from the analysis? What can we conclude from this hydrologic and hydraulic analysis?
Let's see the questions.
Did you understand what the analysis was aiming? What was the objective of the analysis? Was it clear?
Everybody's so quiet this morning.
Yes, yes. So I'm going to help you with this one. What can we conclude? We can conclude that yes, the park is in a flood-prone area, right? So we have to take actions to protect the park because that's our investment. We need to protect the assets that we're going to build. We need to protect the people that's going to be there, and we also need to take care of the nearby communities. So every action that we take, we must see how it may impact the nearby communities and the nearby like natural environment also. Maybe someone is more interested in answer this question is, was this analysis a flood risk assessment? I really want to know what do you think? Considering the three components of risk: hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. Can we conclude that this was a flood risk assessment?
Just a thing for all the participants. You can ask with your voice, or if you prefer, you can text the question inside the chat, wherever you prefer.
I would say, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I would say yes, it could fall under flood risk assessment.
Okay, and why do you think it does?
Because, well, in the first instance, the location of the park.
Mm-hmm. So yes, it takes into account the location of the park. Um, Anyone else want to?
Yes, we have other prep students who said that yes, I think so. So Mark says that.
Mark says he agrees.
In my opinion, when we consider the three components of risk, maybe the hazard part, the probability of the hazard part is not very clear here. I see that what area is exposed, including the nearby communities and the park, and also the associated consequences, the expanded area as it expands from 5 to 10 to 100-year scenarios, the consequences is bigger. But I don't know, it's not clear how is the probability of natural hazard, maybe.
Okay, we can consider the probability as an analysis of the frequency. So if we have the analysis of different scenarios with different return periods, we can consider the probability of the extent of the severity of the hazard by having these scenarios in different return periods.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, but that's very important. Now we need to know how probable are these events in our project. But here the important thing is that we have both hazard, that's the floods. We have the exposure, so we see how our project, that's the park, and how nearby communities may be impacted. But what we are missing to consider this risk assessment is vulnerability. Because first, we are seeing just this blue area. We don't know exactly how's the depth, no? How's the water height in each point of the map. We just know that that may be a flooded area. And we don't know if, for example, the nearby communities that are located there have houses on silts. So you know the silts that are elevated, maybe those houses are elevated above the ground, and they are not that vulnerable to floods because they are prepared to flood. Yeah, yes. So their vulnerability is reduced if those houses are elevated. And we can also consider the vulnerability of the park. We can consider that the areas that are more exposed to floods are areas like parks or parking lots that are not as vulnerable to floods as if we had there like any other houses or constructions that may have assets that can be damaged to for that floods. I don't know if I'm clear here. So this is more like a flood hazard assessment and an analysis of exposure, but it's not a complete risk assessment because we're missing the vulnerability dimension. Yes, Karen, you have a question.
Yes, hi. Hola. I'm sorry. You hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a question based on what you just said and on your experience. Is there any of the three elements harder to assess? Like, which is really like what where when we conduct a risk assessment, where is really the challenge? Because I see that sometimes, and this is just from what I've seen, is that you can easily identify the hazard, right? But when you keep moving into the other components, the thing gets harder. Is yeah, is that what you have seen in the projects that you have assessed?
Yes. I think that there are more like the science is more robust to assess hazards. So we have like these seismic models, we have these hydraulic and hydrology models, we can have like these climate change circulation models. So the science behind the hazards are very robust, and there are a lot of people working on the hazard side. Exposure also, you now have a lot of tools like the GIS, Google Earth is very useful, Google Maps is very useful to define the exposure. And vulnerability is really difficult because it depends both on the hazard and the typology of the exposed element. So for example, a wooden house is you have to assess the vulnerability of that wooden house to seismic events and to floods, and that's going to be really different because you need to assess how it reacts to the movement of the soil, and you also have to see how the materials react to water and to contact with water. So I think that's the most difficult, like the components to analyze, but also to integrate the three components. It's a really like big challenge. So that's why these risk assessments can be quite tricky to complete, and there's not a lot of people doing that. I think we have another question. Yunjin?
Yes.
Yes, just to comment on what you just said, I think it's again, but then again, it's also highly context specific and contextual depending on the country's existing information availability, whatever it is, hazard, vulnerability, and exposure information. So, and now my the thing that I wanted to know was in the previous slide, you said it was rather on the hazard or exposure analysis in a GIS format. I think that the tool is like GIS format. But then in what form can a vulnerability analysis can be done? Is it rather in the written report, or what kind of maybe platform or software can be used when we conduct vulnerability analysis?
Yes, the vulnerability analysis, we're going to see it in more depth in module 3 when we are working on the quantitative assessments. But you can have like damage curves for each kind of typology, like the combination of typology and hazards. And that curves relates like the severity of the hazard with a certain amount of damage. And that's more like a quantitative form way to do it. But also, if you see that the houses are in stilts, then from a qualitative like criteria, you can also determine that the vulnerability is lower.
So I can understand that it can be done more in a verbally, that you can describe.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
but also qualitative, quantitative, if you want to have it like with more robust results. And
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
yes, thank you. So let's move forward. In this case, do you think is it necessary to conduct a qualitative risk assessment? And why yes or why not? What kind of qualitative assessment would you recommend? And
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, for the why, when qualitative risk assessment is necessary, one case would be, especially when we are working with the uncertainty and ambiguity. So when we especially work with little prior information, I think qualitative analysis adds value.
Yes, exactly. And as you were mentioning before, if we don't have a lot of information regarding the vulnerability of the assets that we are working with, then this qualitative risk assessment can give us these missing parts, especially if we work with local experts that know the context of the project and the communities. They can bring us these like inputs that we are missing. So let's go to the more fun thing of this session today. We're going to work in a Jamboard to identify one of these failure modes. We're going to be like in one of these workshops, and we're going to work together to define this failure mode, very similar of what you have to do in the exercise. So Julia, if you can go to the Jamboard, please, or should I? Julia?
Hi, Maria Alejandra. Julia lost the control. I don't know
Okay.
if you send me the link, I can help you to share.
I'm back. Sorry, I couldn't.
Okay.
I couldn't control my computer anymore. But I'm here. I'm here now. We can start.
Thank you. Thank you. So I hope you all can see the screen. We are going to work together to using this like workflow that is in the readings of the module for this week to define the failure mode. And the example that we're going to use is that, as you saw, there's like this high exposure to floods in the park. So the designers decided to propose to build a flood protection wall along the left side of the river bank to protect the park. And Julia is showing us with the pointer. Yes, exactly. So the design they contemplates at the protection wall in that bank. And we're going to see what can be the failure modes for this example. So we follow the flow of the description of the failure modes. We first have to start with the loads. So what are the loads for this failure mode? So we are going to assess what happens if the water that's flowing in the river reaches a height higher than the protection wall. And we want to see what happens if that failure of the design happens. I don't know if that's clear.
What we're trying to do here is like when we're doing a failure mode workshop, normally it's like that. So we're with a lot of participants with different backgrounds, experts on the site or experts on their matter. And what we're doing is just like a brainstorming, thinking in all ways that the infrastructure could fail. So the idea is that you start like brainstorming, giving me some ideas, and I will start writing them on the Jamboard. So
that sounds fantastic. I think the one possible scenario would be when the flood is occurring. When a flood hazard occurs, the water could surface the protection wall levee and can flood it into the road. That will cause a traffic block, and it will cause some traffic failure on the road.
Yes. So for what you just said, the load, like the reason that this failure may happen is because of extreme rains and floods, right? So it's
Yes, I imagine that the water could go over the protection wall caused by the flood hazard.
yes, perfect. So what happens in like the loads is the rain and the floods, and then we go with how it starts, right? And how the failure mode starts is when the water reaches a certain height that meets the higher part of the protection wall, and it starts to overflow. So that's when the failure starts, when the water is too high, right? Do you agree?
That's correct.
Okay. And how that failure develops. So the water starts flowing, and what happened next?
what could break the embankment, the protection wall?
Yes. So if we build a wall that comes from like loose materials from earth, it's not very well compacted, then the wall will not be strong enough to face these loads, and it may float. Sonia says, um, I'm sorry, I was missing all the comments on the chat, but we will go through
So
this.
yes, yes, we
Once
have
the
a couple
water
of
overtaps into the area, we have loss of livestock, for example. Yes. So the development of the failure is that water starts to reach to certain areas that we don't want water there, no? So we can have losses of livestock, as Sonia mentions, but we can also have direct impacts on our infrastructure, for example, here in the park. The operation of the park may be interrupted. Gerard mentions erosion. Yes, exactly. So if the protection wall is not covered with a certain material like concrete or vegetation, even it can trigger erosion very fast when the water overflows. And says floating debris can damage the wall. Exactly. Yes. Also, if there's anything flowing in the river, any I don't know, trees or rubbish or something like that, that can also impact the walls, and that's not allowed. That was considered in the design. Mark says roads can be blocked by debris. Exactly. And what happens with that is that roads are very important to evacuate people. So we cannot allow, like we have to minimize obstacles in road because we need to keep people like connected to safety ways to evacuate in case of one of these flood events. And yes, exactly. Cutting off communities from one another and cutting off the operation of a park also. And we have to consider both the workers and the tourists that are in the park. So that's very important. And yes, we have developed all these failure, and we have identified it at the moment of the failure, and that's exactly when our infrastructure suffers, when we can identify direct impacts to the infrastructure, to the operations, to the people around. Before, Mark, you mentioned that utilities can be vulnerable, such as water distribution systems, and if they are buried, communication and electrical infrastructure that was affecting basic services. Exactly. You can also consider in these failure modes all the infrastructure that's additional to what you see. So, for example, if after these floods, the terrain is susceptible to landslides, then these water utilities, like networks, can be also damaged. So you can also have that into consideration.
Perhaps we can move forward with what hinders.
Yes, I was. Yes. So the analysis of the failure modes also let us like identify what can hinder the development of the failure mode, what can prevent that failure mode from happening. And in this moment, it's really important for you to consider that we are analyzing this failure mode as it is. In this case, we are not trying to propose any solution. We are not trying to yes, to see how we can solve all that factors that could help develop the failure mode, but is as it is, as the conditions of that moment. If you take like a photo of the moment, what can hinder the development of the failure modes? Can you think in some ideas what can prevent that failure mode from happening?
I don't know if early warning system for this kind of flood events as a response strategy would be considered a disaster risk reduction solution, or as one of the that we are talking about in the scope of failure mode development.
This is a very good example, because if the early warning system is already in place, then this is a factor that can hinder this failure mode, because it's currently working and it's currently helping the system right now. But if we want to propose the implementation of a early warning system, that's more kind of a solution that we are not going to to evaluate, right? I don't know if you see the difference.
Yes, and I think it's being a direct response measure, and at the same time DRR measure. Yeah,
Yes, example. Exactly. So if it is in place right now, it can hinder the development of the failure mode. Mark says, what about providing a buffer area, a sacrificial area that will be allowed to float in an event? That's a great example also. But is also a great example to see the difference. If the designs are already considering this sacrificial area, that's a factor that hinders the development of the failure mode. If we are proposing a sacrificial area, that's different. Yes, so if already the design considers that we are going to place the parking lot closer to the area that is most exposed to floods, then that's a good example of what can hinder the failure mode. But if we want to propose that, it's going to be like a different thing. And here, you don't also have to think about the like the hard infrastructure, but you can also, especially if you have like a background in social sciences or in governance or in managerial activities, you can say, okay, I know that there's land use code that doesn't allow the construction of new buildings in the upstream of my park, so that will control the runoff area in the future. Make the wall bigger and stronger. That's a solution. So be careful with that, because we don't want that. That's a solution. And the type of material to be used. Okay. Yes. So if it is considered in the design, that's a factor that could both hinder or favor the failure modes, because if we're using loose material, that can even favor the failure of the wall. So back to what I was saying is, like, you can also include in these factors that hinders the failure modes, all the land codes, the design codes, the operational like conditions that you have in the park. If you have like an evacuation route or an evacuation plan, that's also very important to hinder the development of those failures.
Sorry, I don't know if I understood correctly. So, like increasing the resiliency of this embankment material wouldn't be in the scope of hindering failure mode. Rather, it is solution side.
If the design already considers like stronger materials, that will be in the hinder side. But if you are proposing, like if you are saying like a stronger material will be better, maybe that is on the proposal side. You just want to have like an analysis of the moment, not trying to solve the issue.
Yes.
Because if we go and try to solve the issue, then we are losing the opportunity to analyze what happens to bring the infrastructure to fails.
Right.
Arielle, perhaps we can move forward.
Mhm.
Yes, I was just going to say that at the end of the session, we're going to share the link to this Jamboard. On the second page, you have like some other examples that we prepared for you to have like these more insights on the on the example. But yeah, we will share this Jamboard with you later. And thank you all for the participation. And Juli, we can go back to the presentation. Thank you. So as we were telling, this is a real example from the bank. And this was a workshop that took place in the country, where some experts attend. At the end, a total of 31 failure modes were identified. Some of the current situation of the protection dikes, as we were talking about, other solutions that were proposed, embankments, protection works, of the operation of the park itself, and the risk management system. And these are all related to the different categories, as you were seeing in the module, that failure modes can be analyzed from a technical factor, that's more like from the engineering dimension, but also from the organizational and the operation and maintenance factors. So not all failure modes are like from like how the infrastructure or how the bridge is going to break, how the wall is going to collapse, how the, I don't know, building is going to collapse too. But you can also include these failure modes that include all the operationals, the maintenance, for example. If we do not consider a maintenance plans in this infrastructure, then they can also fail. So if you have more like a social or managerial background, please consider a failure mode that is not related to the gray infrastructure, especially if you are not familiar of the engineering behind that. And we would really like to see other kinds of failure modes that you may identify, follow your background. Um, and this is a really nice graph that we wanted to share with you, because these are the kind of results that we can have from a failure mode workshop. Uh, so also, as you saw in the lectures, each failure mode is defined by three aspects: the probability, the consequences, and the uncertainty of each of one. And this graph joins these three aspects. So the probability is in the y-axis. So at the bottom, you have like a low probability, and at the top is high probability of the failure mode to happen. Then on the x-axis, you have the consequences. So at the left, you have when there's like minimal, no consequences, both in terms of economic losses and social losses, like impacts on lives. And on the right side, you have major consequences. Each dot that you see in the graph is the opinion of one expert. So these are a really nice way to plot in the same graph the opinion of several people on the same aspect. So as you may recall, the workshop starts with an individual identification of the failure modes, and then goes into a more general discussion and analysis where all experts analyze all of the possible failure modes that were identified in the individual phase. So this is the result that like says, okay, we agree that there is this kind of failure that may happen in the project, but let's see how all of us as experts on the topic with different backgrounds, not just engineering, see what is its probability, what is its consequence, and what is its uncertainty, and let's see this all together in one place. And this will help us take decisions and see what we need to do further. For example, if all the dots like in this graph are concentrated in the left side, in the lower side of the graph, then you are working with a failure mode that is, I know there's a question, but give me some moments. I will finish working with it. So if all the dots are in the left lower side, then you have a failure mode that is really rare to occur, and the consequences are minimal. So you don't have to invest your energy and resources to try to work more in that and try to find more information. But if you are on the other side, on the other corner, the higher probability and the major consequences, and all the experts thinks that's the option, then you require changes to the projects. And maybe you need to perform a quantitative disaster risk assessment. If you are more on the minor consequences by high probability, you need to take a short or medium term measurements that may be like floods that really happens like several times in a year, and then you decide to have this sacrificial area to prevent losses. You say like, okay, this will flood, but nothing is going, and I'm not going to lose anything, and we're going to be fine. But also if you have like major consequences with low probability, these may be like an earthquake, you need to identify that risk, and you have to follow with the monitoring. And also if there's high uncertainty and the experts agree that's high uncertainty in a certain failure mode, you may also need like further analysis to be done. Ying, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. Just a simple question. This uncertainty on the right side of the legend, does it mean uncertainty regarding probability or uncertainty regarding failure mode in general? So it means like both probability and consequences are uncertain?
Yes, it's mean more like in a general in a general like of the failure mode, you know, like if the experts are not very sure if one of the infrastructure is going to be like strong enough, or you don't have a lot of information. For example, you are evaluating the early warning system, for example, but you don't know exactly how it is working, if it's already implemented, if the results are calibrated, and if the warnings are really good communicated, then you have like an uncertainty of how this this element works. Yeah, you need to investigate more. You need to have more information, and it's kind of that. It's like kind of if you don't know exactly all the conditions that may develop or may start the failure mode. I don't know if that's clear.
Yeah, I understood. Yeah. So it's a uncertainty associated with the lack of information and the necessity for further studies.
Yes, exactly.
Right,
Yeah,
thanks.
because I don't know if you are considering that there's a really strict law and the government is really making it like to be fulfilled and completed, then you say like, okay, the law doesn't allow us to do X or Y, and then there's a low uncertainty and that's not going to happen, something like that. But yeah, it's uncertainty of the whole system, of the whole conditions.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me check. There's nothing in the chat. So this is just to show you how you can have like a really nice tool to make decisions and to inform the decision makers also. Oops. And I don't know, we have like some minutes left. If you want to share your experiences with qualitative risk assessments in your country, in your sector, or if you have any specific questions about the module or the exercise, we are happy to help.
Oh, I see no one, so I'll take advantage again. I have had a question in the previous slide, but I can just say it here. I saw that in the some of the videos of video modules in the EDX side, in the stages of the qualitative analysis stages, after the quantitative analysis, there was a measures and management plan. For the failure modes that don't need qualitative analysis. So quantitative analysis. So does that mean so I want to understand a little bit what would be the next step after the end of the qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis. I saw in the previous slide that that located in the right top of the failure mode workshop. It sends, yes, right. So quantitative disaster risk assessment and design modifications. So what happens after the quantitative analysis? Do you also implement the risk reduction measures or any kind of the operation or maintenance or design recommendation? So the solution is the same or is it different for qualitative and quantitative analysis? So both analysis, the management plan will be implemented, or the type of management plan or measures or recommendations or operation, because there are a lot of terminologies going on, and I want to know if there's any sensitivity in understanding these words, or is it all the like synonyms? Yeah, that's
yes. There are many things to take from that question. So thank you. The idea, and at least of what we want here as we implement the methodology in the bank, is to always have a disaster risk management plan for the projects. And that's in the that doesn't depend if the analysis was qualitative or quantitative. Like we want to have this document, this instrument for the monitoring of the operations during the execution phase. So for us, it's very important to always complete a risk assessment with a disaster risk management plan. And this management plan is going to have all of the measures and initiatives and proposals and changes in the design and like improvements in the operation. All of these activities are going to be included in this management plan, and this will be like monitoring the implementation of these activities is going to be supervised in the execution phase of the project. So yes, when we complete a qualitative disaster risk assessment, we're going to have the first version of the management plan, and that's going to say, okay, this failure mode has a high probability and with minimal consequences. So the short measures are going to be, I don't know, this one, and this one. And the responsible for implementing those measurements is going to be this agency. And this should be implemented in the short term, that is before, I don't know, in between 3 and 6 months. And yes, and we have another like activity that's going to say, okay, there's a high I don't know, probability of any other failure mode, and we need more information regarding this. So a quantitative risk assessment is needed. So that conclusion is included in the management plan, and it says it has to be implemented by this agency. So that agency has the responsibility to perform the quantitative development, the quantitative risk assessment, and that's part of the disaster risk management plan. And as this document is like more dynamic, it can changes as the project evolves, then the results from that quantitative risk assessment that says, okay, we understand now that the height of the water is going to reach 2 meters. So the, I don't know, these houses in this area must be moved, or you have to build in silts, or you have to be build a 3-meter flood wall. That other measure is going to be included in the management plan that we already have. Is that clear?
So yeah, I understood. I understood perfectly. Thanks. And so in the same way as we did from the qualitative analysis, will we have the same version of the management plan after the quantitative analysis? Or
yeah, it's going to be updated.
Oh, okay.
Like
So
this is not just one document. It can evolve. It's more dynamic if you get more information regarding one hazard or regarding exposure or the design changes. The RMP can also change. And
so,
it's important it to be updated, right? So we
right.
don't want this to be like one big document that no one reads and it's in the shelf. Well, you want this to be like more alive.
Yeah, feedback. Yeah. And I wonder if there's any like sensitive difference between plan, measures, and recommendation in this sense, or they are all the same kinds.
That's
So
a very
maybe,
good discussion because
so maybe
there's this
yeah.
concept of tolerance of risk. Yeah, and that depends also on the resources that you have, on the time that you have, and all the risk appetite that you have. So many are going to be recommendations, say like, please consider this. But there are going to be also many that are going to be like basic minimal things you have to do to mitigate risk, and that's a case by case analysis, I think.
We're getting to the end of the session, so perhaps we could move forward.
Yes. Thank
Yes,
you very
Julia,
much.
thank you. Thank you. No, if you, just a reminder, if you have any questions, please send us an email, contact us. We're really happy to answer all your questions. And we will meet next Friday for a session on Module 3. Remember to download the ePresa software. And if you have any troubles, also send us an email and we will be happy to help. And everyone have a really nice weekend. Thank you very much to be with us and enjoy
Thank
the
you very
rest of the day.
much. Thank you very much, Maria Alejandra.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Maria. Thanks,
Bye.
Julia. Bye bye.
Thank you.